All right, welcome back to the Primitive Camping and Bushcraft podcast. My name is Chris Spear. Today, we're going to talk about something that sparked a pretty interesting discussion in the Facebook group. The question was extremely simple, and it has sparked a huge debate within the Primitive Camping and Bushcraft group on Facebook. Y'all ready for the question? What are your thoughts on making a raised bed for camping? I posted a picture. And before I get too deep into this, I want to explain why I posted that picture. Now, if you've spent any amount of time around bushcraft circles, survival circles, primitive camping circles, you've probably seen them. Some dude out in the woods, and it's always being fast forwarded. It's always like sped up. Some dude building some shelter out of mud or the side of a hill, raising his bed up. He's got poles, a bunch of saplings, got a couple of cross members, maybe some cedar boughs or some pine needles or leaves piled up for insulation. Nothing fancy, but just a sleeping platform built up off the ground. And everybody's seen it. So I figured when I posted the photo, I'd get a few responses, but golly, man, let me tell you. So what happened was we were camping, my brother and I, and it was late July, early August. I'd say it would have been a long time ago, 2016, 15, 16, somewhere in that effect, something like that. 10, 11 years ago, something like that. I don't remember. But we went camping. We owned this property. We had 4 acres out in the middle of nowhere. It was surrounded by creeks. It was essentially an island. Actually, it was in 2013. So, that was 13 years ago, 14 years ago now. Crazy. So it was this little island, and it was 4 acres. And it was crazy because it had flooded. The Yellow River or Yellow Creek or whatever the name of the place was, it came up and it flooded. I mean, it washed out our road, washed out our everything all the way across. We had a culvert down there. And I can remember it being so muddy and nasty. I used a hammock. And Aaron made this bed. He made this raised bed. And that is what's pictured. It was slept on. It was used. If you notice in the photograph, there was some dog fennel laying on the bed. Now, he did have a sleeping pad and laid down on it on top of it. A lot of people, because what was pictured, you saw what was pictured. But what you didn't see is what was actually used. And you didn't see what we were doing. Right next to it was a 55-gallon drum with a garbage can with a drum liner in it that held all our water because we could not get any fire to start. Crazy. We couldn't get our water boiled. And it started raining, so we collected rainwater, and we got at least 20 or 30 gallons of rainwater, so we filtered it out, with a handkerchief, got all the bugs and nasty off of it, and drank it. So, but I figured when I posted the photo, I'd just get a couple of responses. Maybe a couple of folks would say that they liked the photo or what I didn't expect was how divided the answers would be and how some of the answers would be very pointed, very not only just pointed, but just like it sparked controversial debate within the group. It's crazy. I did not expect how divided the answers would be, I guess. Some people loved the idea. Some people thought it was a waste of time. Some people immediately started talking about insulation. Others, that countless comments saying hammocks, just bring a hammock. That's what a hammock is for. And as I sat there reading through all the comments, I started realizing something. People weren't really talking about the raised bed. They were talking about what the raised bed represented. They were talking about how it represented comfort, effort, skills, time, experience, and ultimately what they wanted out of their camping experience, basically. So one of the first comments talked about digging a trench underneath the bed and placing some coals under it. Now, if you spent any time reading old survival manuals and studying primitive shelters, you probably heard this idea before. The concept is pretty simple. Heat rises. You're going to put some hot coals underneath and you stay warm all night. It sounds pretty easy on paper, but then somebody pointed out the downside, the smoke, the fire, the safety. What happens if coal pops out? What happens if conditions change? And right there is where the discussion got interesting, because every solution creates another problem. Every advantage comes with a trade-off. And honestly, that's true for almost everything we do outdoors. And the more I go camping, the more I realize there aren't many perfect solutions to anything. There's an end result, but there's not a perfect solution. They're usually just different compromises. You have to compromise a little here, compromise a little there. Then there's also another group of people that started talking about insulation, using cedar or spruce boughs and pine needles, leaves, natural materials, all these things that come to mind when you're doing bedding. If you've ever slept directly on cold ground, yes, I have. Raise your hand. I see you back there in the back of the class. Yes, I do, right there. I see you. You probably learned this lesson pretty quick. The ground steals your heat. If you've slept in a hammock in the middle of the wintertime without an underquilt, you get cold quick. It steals the heat fast. The ground doesn't care how expensive your sleeping bag was. They really don't. The ground also doesn't care how tough you think you are. When it comes to the fight, the ground is always going to win. That's one of the reasons raised beds have been used for so long. Not only that, raised beds really have been used to get people out of wet conditions. Keep them up off the ground so they don't get bugs and critters and, scorpions and snakes and stuff like that. If the snakes want you, he's still going to climb up that raised bed anyway. Scorpions, same. It don't matter. It just helps you protect yourself and keep you up off the ground. Now, raised beds are not because somebody was out there trying to build furniture in the woods. They're solving a problem. They're getting you off the cold ground, getting you off the wet ground, getting you away from the insects, from the creepy crawlers, and, all the, getting you a better night's sleep. And honestly, this whole discussion about raised beds kind of reminds me of Jacob in the Old Testament, where, the Bible says Jacob stopped for the night and took a stone and used it for a pillow. All right. It's kind of what we're talking about. I don't know about y'all, but my neck already hurts just by hearing that. Just by thinking about using a rock for a pillow. It's killing me. I used my backpack for a pillow whenever I was in the desert. I slept on the floor in an airport hangar on the cement for a week straight. And it was killing me. waiting on an airplane ride home. But while he was laying there on the ground with a stone up underneath his head, he had one of the most important encounters of his life. He dreamed that a ladder reaching into heaven, and God spoke to him. Now, I'm not suggesting that we all throw away our hammocks and start camping on the ground and using rocks as pillows and everything. I think most of us are a little advanced. A little bit more advanced than thinking about stuff like that. But, you know, this visual does remind us that sometimes we get so focused on our own comfort that we forget why we came out into the woods in the first place. Sometimes the greatest things happen when we slow down long enough to be still. And I think that's one reason so many of us are drawn to camping. We step away from the noise. We step away from the distractions. And for a little while, it's just us, the woods, and whatever the Lord wants to teach us. Now, one of the funniest parts of this entire discussion was how so many people answered with one word. If you go back through, there was tons of comments. And the answers were hammock. That's it. Just hammock. That's all they said. Over and over again. Hammock. 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 One person even joked that their favorite raised bed was called a hammock. Well, honestly, they were not wrong. All a hammock is a modernized raised bed that you could take almost anywhere. I didn't realize it. Sailors used hammocks back in the olden days. They used hammocks. A hammock is different materials than a regular wooden raised bed. And it does have a different design, but the same problem is being solved. Are we starting to see a pattern with the past several episodes of this podcast where a problem presents and a problem is being solved? So with this, staying off the ground is solving the problem. One of the problems is better sleep. You're getting to sleep better. You're staying away from the moisture. You're staying off the roots, off the sticks, off the sweet gum balls. I don't know if you guys, if that's just a South Mississippi thing, but sweet gums, golly, they're everywhere. It helps with the problem of keeping you away from the creepy crawlies. And it's really the same concept of as a raised bed, hammocks, raised beds, same thing. Now, I've talked about this for years with hammocks. I mean, I just did a video today for Nightcat. One of their lay flat hammocks. They sent me for a review, and I did a how to put it together video. I posted it on YouTube, and it's on my YouTube channel. And it is a true lay flat hammock. And it's very comfortable. Their newer version, it comes with it's kind of weird because it comes with a sleeping pad or air mattress. And then it has a dry sack. It's like a dry bag. And you put all your stuff in there. And then you can turn around and use the dry bag as a pillow. I mean, it's crazy. The thought that went into this thing is ridiculous. Most modern camping gear exists because somebody found a better way to solve an old problem. And like we talked about last week, everything is a gear. Every piece of gear solves a problem. Everything that you carry into the woods solves a problem. Everything that we have, all these books, all the survival books, all the camping books, all these books from all these individuals, they solve a problem. They have stuff in there that helps the reader solve a problem. Take the Bible, for instance. There's a lot of stuff in there for you so you can solve some problems. And it's crazy. It's the same concept over and over and over again. The problem didn't change. The solution did. So after that, another theme started popping up, and this one really hurt my feelings. But another theme started popping up, and it was age. What's weird is that not everybody understands that. But once you start hitting your 50s, boy, does things hit different. Golly, that's crazy, ain't it? Just 10 years ago, I didn't have to wear glasses. Now all of a sudden I can't see and I have bifocals. That's crazy. Some of y'all are going to understand this immediately. Several people basically said the same thing, that, hey, my back hurts. I'm too old to sleep on the ground. Getting up and down isn't as easy as it used to be. Oh, and I get it. 20-year-old Chris could sleep on a pile of rocks and wake up the next day and conquer the world. 52-year-old Chris, not so much. The older you get, the more comfort starts making sense. The more you start making plans around your comfort. And it ain't because you got soft. It's because you have collected some miles. You've collected a few injuries. You've learned that being miserable isn't a requirement for enjoying the great outdoors. When I was a kid, when I was a youngin', I would go camping. I wouldn't bring anything except for a fishing pole. And that's how I went camping. Chris don't do that no more. And that leads me to another interesting question. At what point does a campsite become a camp? Think about that for a second. At Camp What the Heck, I have tables. I built a cooking area. I've got a fire pit. I built a shelter. I got this log where I do all my teaching and filming and stuff like that. But at what point does it stop being a temporary campsite and start becoming a semi-permanent camp? And I can honestly say, Camp What the Heck is a semi-permanent camp. Hunters do it all the time. Hunters will have like a little cabin miles into the woods. They'll go out there, they'll hike out there, take a four-wheeler, take an ATV, OTV, whatever, some kind of conveyance. And they'll go out there and they'll camp out. And they'll go hunting and they'll come back. Whenever they're done, they'll go home. Bushcrafters do it. Trappers do it. Trappers, they get on the trapping line and they go on for weeks, if not a month at a time. People have been doing this for centuries. And that's where all the raised beds start making more sense. If I'm going out for one night, I'm probably going to take a hammock. If I'm going to stay somewhere for a week, I'm probably going to take a hammock. You know, maybe that thinking will change. If I'm staying somewhere for a month, I'm definitely bringing some kind of a bed. Like the lay flat hammock. I could do that. But it's definitely going to change. The longer you stay, the more valuable infrastructure becomes. The things that you bring with you, they're going to be more valuable to you. And it don't matter whether you're talking about a raised bed or a table or a shelter or a cooking area or a tripod or a pot and pan. Whatever you bring is going to be more valuable to you the longer you stay at a place. And there was another comment that brought up something that I hadn't really considered, and that was location. One person talked about Florida. Now, if you spent time in Florida, there's a lot more reason to get up off the ground. Yeah, a lot of snakes, a lot of spiders, fire ants, mud, moisture, not much different than South Mississippi. But getting off the ground starts making a whole lot more sense. And that's one of the big lessons about camping. Context matters. What works in Arizona may not work in Mississippi. What works in Alaska is definitely not going to work in Florida. What works in Texas may not work in Canada. What's funny about it is that the environment always gets a vote. Then you got the leave no trace folks. Some folks pointed out that building structures from natural materials leaves an impact. And you're right. Bushcraft and leave no trace don't always walk hand in hand. Sometimes they do overlap. Sometimes they don't. I'm not taking sides on that discussion today or in this episode. I'm just going to simply point out that it's a valid consideration. If you're cutting materials and building structures, you're going to be changing the landscape. Some people absolutely are not comfortable with that. Some are. But that is a decision that every outdoors person has to make for themselves. But one thing I noticed is that very few people were against the skill itself. Nobody was sitting there saying, hey, you don't need to learn that. You don't need to learn how to do that. A lot of people were just saying, I think I would rather use something else. That's a big difference. Knowing how to use a raised bed and choosing not to build one are two completely different things. Me personally, I know how to start a fire with primitive methods. That don't mean I'm going to leave my lighter at home. I know how to purify water with natural materials. I'm still going to bring my Grail geopress with me when I go out into the woods. One thing that I've noticed in this adventure is that skill gives you options. Gear gives you convenience. And the best of all the outdoor folks understand both of those. So where do I stand on the raised beds? Well, here's my answer. I honestly think everybody should learn how to build one. Not because you'll use one every weekend, but because it teaches valuable lessons. It teaches you insulation, shelter construction, material selection. It teaches you problem solving. It teaches you how to plan. All of those lessons carry over into the outdoor skills. All those lessons carry over into all the outdoor skills. Am I going to build a raised bed for a overnight trip? Probably not. I'm going to grab my hammock. Would I build one for a long-term camp? Maybe, but I'm still going to grab my hammock. Would I build one in a survival situation? More than likely. Because now the equation changes. Now, conserving energy is going to matter. Now, staying warm is going to matter. Rest is going to matter. And that's really the lesson from this whole discussion, is that a raised bed isn't the story. The problem that it solves is the story. Cold ground, wet ground, poor sleep, moisture, insects, comfort, rest. The raised bed is simply one more solution to a problem that people have been dealing with for thousands of years. And that problem is trying to get a good night's sleep outdoors. So let me ask you, would you build a raised bed? Or would you just hang a hammock? Food for thought. All right, guys, head on over to the Primitive Camp